Hello guys, this is me Simo Urahara, and in this video I will represent to you a list of 13 most powerful Bankai in Bleach. I decided to choose the number 13 because it represents the Gucci 13 squads. But first of all, and to be completely clear, to come up with a fair agreed classification is something hard, if not impossible, for many reasons. That's why for my list I adopted many criteria. Among those is the power of the Bankai holder, the power of the Bankai itself, how much it affects his environment, if it has any special technique that makes it more powerful, and its ability to develop in the future. And finally, if the Bankai had any critical roles and achievements in the story. And I would also like to point out that this list doesn't include first Kenpachi's Bankai and also Ichigo's real Bankai, because we don't have enough information about them. But before we go guys, if you like my content and you are a fan of Bleach, I need your Ryatsu. So please put some of your Ryatsu in this button by subscribing to the channel and press the bell button to get a notification whenever I post a new video. So, we will be starting with Rose's Bankai. Honestly, the weakness point of this Bankai is Rose himself, as I already mentioned in a previous video, because the ability of his Bankai is one of the most powerful in the story. The full control of the heart of his opponent with music is not normal. That made even Masculine surprised that if there is a Zanpakuto that has both fire and water abilities combined, because the power of Rose's Bankai goes beyond the concept of illusion, like the Shikai of Kyokasuigetsu. Rose's Bankai makes the opponent imagine what he sees as a reality, because if you had noticed in the second dance when he attacked Masculine with fire, Masculine really felt the pain of the burning and his clothes got burned. It's not like the effect of the burning got removed after he destroyed his airdromes. No, it continued, as you can see in this scene. The only problem is that Rose is so talkative. He revealed to Masculine how his Bankai can be deactivated, and the only weakness of the Bankai is to destroy your airdromes, so the music doesn't get to your heart and manipulate it. Unfortunately, we didn't see the last dance of the Bankai, so if Rose's tactical mistake got eliminated, the Bankai deserved to be within this list. Tosen's Bankai. Frankly, this Bankai's abilities are terrifying and very scary. Tosen describing his Bankai as empty black hell wasn't out of the blue. If Rose's Bankai is making the opponent kind of hallucinate by hearing the music that makes them see the water and fire burning them, Tosen's Bankai makes the opponent lose his hearing, vision and smell, even sensing the Ryatsu. And that's happened by creating an isolated space in which the opponent is subject to all these terrifying circumstances. The opponent losing his vision and hearing senses is enough to make him enter a state of extreme terror that will put him down, defeated psychology before he receives fatal stabs. We notice how Tosen used some of his Bankai's abilities to attack Kinsey in his team in Kisuke's flashback, and therefore the Bankai as an ability is very strong. I can't imagine there is another person other than the crazy Zaraki who is able to avoid the ability of the Bankai unless he is in a high level of Ryatsu. The only thing negative point about his Bankai is that it needs a lot of space to be activated and widely appear to everyone, which can make the Bankai itself open for outside attacks. But I generally consider Tosen's Bankai one of the strongest in the story. It's true that we haven't exactly seen the mechanism of Rukia's Bankai to clearly understand how it functions, but looking at the power she got from the Royal Palace and exactly the true power of her Shikai are things that give you the impression that the Bankai is an extension of these techniques but in a stronger form. I don't think that the Bankai is confined to the explosion that follows Rukia's pronunciation of Bankai, because the problem with Rukia is that she wasn't able to control the Bankai, so by that she can't use any of its techniques in that period. As Byakuya said about the Bankai, it's very dangerous and any misuse may cost her her life. But by taking into account the criteria mentioned in the beginning of this video, the power of Rukia she got after returning from the Royal Palace, defeating Ace Note with one blow, and the ability to control the Bankai very well, especially after the timescape of 10 years, I think Rukia deserves this position. I have already made a video about Renji's Bankai explaining how Renji fought using only half the strength of his Bankai through the story and how he wasn't taking advantage of the power of Baboon King, and after he went to the Royal Palace he finally was able to recognize the name of the other half of the Bankai. For that Renji became in another level of strength after he obtained the full Bankai power of the two kings. For example, if you notice in the first appearance of Ace Note and Masculine, I thought that the strongest between them was Ace Note because of his leadership and how Masculine seemed naive and did not give the impression that he was strong. But during the second half of the arc, it became clear that Masculine is much stronger than we thought. He defeated Hisagi in one hit, he defeated Kensei and Rose despite their use of the Bankai, and imagine he defeated them without even using the Volt Standing. However, Masculine couldn't defeat Renji. We have seen how after Renji released the Bankai, the power difference became in another level. The Bankai gave Renji extraordinary destructive power, started by using the power of the Baboon King by throwing Masculine at lightning speed, as well as the use of the power of the Snake King to penetrate the body of Masculine, the one who has legendary physical abilities. That didn't save him from the power of the Bankai. Therefore, Renji's new Bankai, despite the simplicity of its techniques, it's very effective and very powerful. At the beginning, when Gin gave us the definition of his Bankai, that it could reach a length of 15 kilometers at a record speed and return to its normal position in the blink of an eye, it seemed to me that those capabilities were nothing great. But when we learned with Aizen the true ability of his Bankai, there everything has changed, and that's what made me put him in this rank. Gin describing himself as a snake didn't come out of nowhere. His Bankai makes his sword contain a deadly poison that destroys the cells of the body. Therefore, we can consider the speed of his sword to expand on the Bankai's level just a cover to activate that terrifying ability that would have eliminated Aizen if not for the Hogyoku interference. We are not talking about Aizen the Shinigami, but rather Aizen who became at high level of strength after breaking barriers of the Shinigami on Hollow. The effect of the Bankai on Aizen shows itself how powerful the Bankai can be. I recently made a video about the Bankai. It is true that I mentioned that I was expecting something more than what Kobo showed about the Bankai, but at the same time I can't ignore the power of the Bankai. Kisuke's Bankai has two very strong features. They are the healing defensive capabilities of Benihime Atharami, which is restructuring anything it touches, and the Bankai also gives Kisuke a legendary boost to reshape any part of his body. The problem with the Bankai is that it is limited in range and Benihime Atharami is visible to the opponent, which may expose it to get attacked, but the Bankai having the power to restructure anything gives Kisuke the advantage of fighting without the fear of getting fatal injuries. In my personal opinion, this Bankai deserves to be in this rank. Most of the Bankai that has been mentioned until now have a weakness points, not a small ones. They are either limited in range or dangerous for their users. But when we talk about Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi, we are talking about a semi-integrated Bankai in terms of everything. The range is not limited like Kisuke's Bankai and doesn't put the user in danger like Rukia's Bankai by providing Byakuya a safe zone that protects him from the Senbon Sakura sharp blades, and this is without talking about the various techniques of Byakuya in the Bankai mode. It is enough to know that Byakuya is one of the few Shinigami who possesses several modes on the level of the Bankai. Even before he went to the Royal Palace, Byakuya had the Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi, Hakuteken, and Gokei. As for going to the Royal Palace and returning with the greater power, he increased the power of Senbon Sakura a lot. Enough that the poor Ace Note thought that the attack of Byakuya was by using the Bankai, while it wasn't. It was just a simple blow of Shikai. If it hadn't been for Gerard's miracle ability, Byakuya would have ended him from the first moments. Yet even in its Volt Standing, we notice how Byakuya's last technique removed Gerard's head from existence. And just imagine with me an attack like that, how would it have been on someone who didn't possess the miracle ability? Although he didn't appear in the manga, he only appeared in the novel Spirits Are Forever With You. However, the power of the Bankai of the 8th Kenpachi made me put him in this list for several reasons. The first one is that it is a unique Bankai. Azashiro was always in the Bankai mode, meaning that for many centuries he has been wandering around the Soul Society while he is activating the Bankai. And we come to the most important thing, which is the ability of his Bankai. Orozakuro's ability can make Azashiro merge with his environment, and its surface equals the surface of the Serity, so that he can merge with anything from air to objects, and he can also hear and see everything that happens within that space. Also, the Bankai enables him to release Keto spells in several places and in a large number at the same time, and he can release a Hado of number 90 several times at the same moment by copying his mouth and hands, without forgetting his lethal technique, Setai Yugo, that makes him merge with his opponent and explode his internal organs from the inside. And by this technique, he defeated the 7th Kenpachi. All these techniques and the specific strengths of the Bankai, and yet Azashiro did not fully control Orozakuro, his Bankai. I mean, imagine with me what the strengths of this Bankai will be like after he masters perfect control over his Bankai. So putting Orozakuro in this place wasn't out of the blue. Honestly, I never expected Zaraki to have a Bankai, because his advantage was originally that he doesn't depend on one. So even when it was released, it remained nameless. Yachiro was the one telling him about the power of the Bankai, and Zaraki's Bankai in terms of operation mechanism is similar to Vasto Lord mode of Ichigo. Both modes gave their users a boost, legendary when it comes to physical power and speed. I mean, we have noticed how Zaraki removed Jirard's shoulder just using his teeth, and how he managed to cut it in half. So when we talk about Zaraki's Bankai, we also talk about brutal force in its highest manifestation, to the point that Zaraki's body couldn't handle that power. Moreover, the problem of this Bankai is that it makes Zaraki lose control over his consciousness, but I think that after 10 years he became able to solve this problem. The most special things about Kyoraku's Bankai, and what makes it in the top 5 for me, is that the terrifying Ryatsu that the Bankai releases the moment it's activated. This point itself explains the power of the Bankai. The moment Kyoraku launches the Bankai, we notice that even the ones who were far from him did sense his Ryatsu. Everyone felt an unusual shiver. As for the opponent that the Bankai was released in front of him, he will become under the mercy of the Bankai's rules. The act or the rule that I see as the most terrifying for me is the third one, Dangyo no Fushi, that puts him and his opponent inside water, similar to a deep ocean. I mean, imagine that you suddenly find yourself inside a large ocean, something really terrifying. But the problem of this Bankai is that Kyoraku also suffers from some of his rules, like the first Dan where he shares wounds with his opponent, or the third one where he drains Ryatsu and his opponent together. Also, the Bankai cannot be released many times because of the amounts of Ryatsu it takes. What? Toshiro's Bankai number 3? Stronger than Kyoraku and Zaraki's Bankai? Yes, I think so, because of the criteria that has been set in this video. And of course not any Bankai. I'm speaking here about Toshiro's Bankai in its complete form. The criteria that I mentioned in this video, Toshiro got them all and more. First, we are talking about a character that is considered a miracle by itself, and Kyoraku described him as a very talented kid. And it has been confirmed a lot of times that he has the strongest ice type Zanpakuto. It is true that the Bankai in the form that we have seen throughout the story does not give you the impression that it is strong because he lost many battles, but that perception is fundamentally wrong, because the problem of Toshiro is like Renji's Bankai or Ichigo's real Zanpakuto. All the three share the point that they were fighting with a Zanpakuto in its imperfect form. So when Hyurimaro is complete, then we are talking about another Toshiro. The guy becomes a grown up, like 50 years has been added to his age. His body grows large so it can bear the strength of the Bankai in its completed form. As for techniques, then we speak about legendary techniques. First, Toshiro, unlike Rukia, does not suffer from the issue of fear that his body will be damaged by the strength of ice. Secondly, we saw how he had this amazing ability to freeze anything without even using his sword. With one movement of his hand, he was able to immobilize Jirard's armor. And you know who is Jirard, how his power has been increasing with every fight he got. And when Toshiro uses a sword, we are talking about another level of strength. I mean, with one stroke of Toshiro's sword, he was able to cut Jirard's special sword, the Sword of Hope, that brings despair into the hearts of the enemies, and even cuts them off, as we noticed with Zaraki. The sword was cut by Toshiro easily. The frightening thing here is not that he was able to slash the sword, but Toshiro, by cutting and freezing anything, he will be able to disable the ability of of the thing that is freezing it. And this is what happened with Jiraiya's sword. The last one had to use another weapon, and so whatever ability your weapons holds, it will be deactivated by Toshiro's ice. And that's without talking about his last ability, Shikai Hyokutsu. Imagine with this technique, Toshiro can even freeze fire. The fire that is considered the main weakness of ice becomes useless against this technique. With all these great techniques, I put Toshiro in this position because he's still a boy and he has all the time ahead of him to make his Bankai stronger than the level it showed against Jiraiya. And he also has the Zanpakuto, the strongest of its kind. I consider it the opposite to Ryujin Jakka, the strongest fiery Zanpakuto. And now we come to the greatest, the monsters, the top. If I said Ichibe's Bankai is the second, then you know who the first is. And if I put the first in the second place, then you would know that Ichibe will be the first. And I don't think there is a Shikai in terms of capacity stronger than Ichibe's Shikai. Its unique ability to remove the names of objects and people is terrifying, but the horror story can't be complete without him activating his Bankai, which gives him the ability to add the name he wants to the opponent, and removing his name with the ability of the Shikai. We saw how he gave Yamamoto the name of Black Ant to make his ability similar to the ant's power. The strength of the Bankai made Yamamoto use the Almighty to avoid certain death. That's why Ichibe's Bankai is very special. First, because he is the owner, and second, he is the leader of the Zero Squad and the first in the story to use a term other than the Bankai, where the term Shinuchi was used instead of Bankai. This term existed before the term Bankai appeared. And finally, to the first place, the strongest Bankai in Bleach, the legendary Bankai, the one that frightens opponents, terrified cowards who hide behind cheap tricks to avoid the power of his Zanpakuto, because they know the truth, the fact that you cannot defeat the Guardian of Hell in a direct battle, the fact that you cannot face Yamamoto's Bankai on your own. All the Bankai mentioned until now have limited range, but to talk about the old man's Bankai, it's a Bankai that eats up an entire world. I mean, imagine as soon as the old man Bankai is released, climate changes begin to form in Soul Society weather and its temperature. This all when Yamamoto just pronounces the word Bankai. As for the ones who are in the heart of the battle against him, they will be in the heart of hell. And Royd said that if it wasn't for the blood vein, he would have burned alive. All this happened and the battle didn't begin yet. As for the abilities, this is the features that makes the old man more special and distinguished from everyone else, is that he has a big diversity in Zanka no Tachi abilities. The 4 sides, East, West, South and North. Each side is a mythical power in itself, gives the old man the absolute defense and deadly attack. For example, the West Zanka no Tachi gave him an unbelievable defense that makes you wonder how you can even get close to the old man, and the West covers the old man with fire reaching temperature of 15 million degrees. Imagine that. When Royd wanted to attack him with his sword, the sword directly turned to ashes, and that's for defense. As for attack, the East Zanka concentrates the fire heat at the edge of his sword blade, so anything it cuts off is burned completely. Notice only the effects left by one blow from the old man's blow to the ground, which Royd narrowly avoided, meaning that Yamaji only needs these 2 sides in order to eliminate any opponent. Another thing that we must not forget is that Yamaji, when he released the Bankai in the last arc, it was with 1 head, but in the short flashback that we have seen of him fighting, we notice how he was using the 2 hands in the Bankai's attack. So imagine with me if the old man launched the Bankai with both hands. For all of this, I consider the old man's Bankai the strongest Bankai in the story, and I consider it an example of Zanpakuto which reached the point of complete communication with its owner through centuries and centuries of continuous training. So I say Toshiro will be Yamaji's version with Ryujin Jakka, so he will not need any centuries to be a copy of the Zanka no Tachi, being the strongest Zanpakuto of ice. So my friends, this was my top 13 strongest Bankai list. What about you? Do you agree with this classification or do you have another one?